So I wasn't paying attention to the time in the previous video, and all of a sudden 10 minutes was up and it stopped recording, and I was like, crap, I wasn't done. So here's part 2, probably going to be a little more concise, talk a little bit quicker, and get through to the end of the point I wanted to make about gay similarities in modern culture to Hanukkah in ancient Judaism. Basically where I left off was discussing how Judaism faced a struggle between becoming largely a cultural institution, because Jews were abandoning some of the religious aspects and were abandoning the observancy, and were only maintaining, not only, but were primarily maintaining a cultural attachment to Judaism. So there was a revolt against the dominant, military oppressive force by the Jews, and there was a civil war among the Jews, and the more observant, more religious, more orthodox side won, and that side of Judaism, did very well for a very long time. Built the temple, it got destroyed again, but they made their presence known. Anyway, gays face a similar problem between assimilation and non-assimilation, because it's possible that a lot of our culture and a lot of our identity is wrapped up and is tied, for better or worse, to the oppression we face. So we face the opportunity in America more so than ever before in America, and possibly more so than ever before in the world, partly because of the technology that exists today, to assimilate. Like, there might have been cultures that liked the gays more than America does at the moment, because certainly there are plenty of people in Missouri and everywhere who don't like the gays. But the gays couldn't have kids, which is kind of a big factor in the whole assimilation in terms of familial bonding. It's kind of the nuclear family. It's been what's been defining humanity for a very long time. I know we used to be polygamists, and people are still polygamists, blah, 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 but the idea of family, which involves kids and passing on culture and identity to your children, was kind of absent from homosexuality up until very recently, because we weren't the type to be stealing babies from other people and raising them as our own. So the question then becomes, what do we lose if we assimilate, and how much of the benefits and the positive aspects of homosexuality are tied into our status? And here's where I would make a reference to kind of subaltern status, which is, a fancy word that I picked up in college in a class on postmodernism, on the way that majority groups can treat minority groups and the way their identity and culture is defined and founded. So let me go to Wikipedia real quick and say, quote, "A working definition of subaltern groups as oppressed minority groups whose presence was crucial to the self-definition of the majority group. Subaltern social groups were also in a position to subvert the authority of those who had hegemonic power." That's the important part. Subaltern social groups were also in a position to subvert the authority of those who had hegemonic power. So now we're kind of moving beyond the Hanukkah aspect of things, because Hanukkah defines the conflict that's occurring. And in many ways, at the time, if I were transported and believed what I believe now to the time of Hanukkah, probably would not have sided with the Maccabees, because I'm not a religious Jew. If I were born then and lived then, I probably would have got wrapped up in the fervor and picked up a knife and fled to the hills and joined the revolt. Blah, blah, blah. But anyway, we have different potential repercussions at work, although a similar dynamic happens when you have the ability to assimilate. And so the question becomes, first of all, how much of the benefits of gay culture stem from our subaltern status and from our oppression and from our minority status? So that gays have excelled in theater and in, the dramatic arts, and stand up for oppressed groups and civil rights, and, we're vocal advocates of goodness in the world. So let's stipulate that that's the case, that for the most part, when I say what side good-thinking Americans should be on, let's say the gays are on the right side. So then the question is, how much of that stems from our own oppression and our role as victimized, oppressed people? And if we lose that, and if we assimilate, and if we become, stronger, then do we lose the status we had in society that made us such good people? And there I would draw a relation to the Catholic Polish church in St. Louis, which for complicated reasons, which I won't really get into, got in a fight with the archdiocese. It basically came down to the title to their land. They didn't want to give up the deed to their land, and they were afraid that if they did, they would lose any power to have any sort of say in how they were run. As long as they owned the land, they felt like they had some authority. So the archdiocese eventually kicked them out of the Catholic world of happiness, and the priest they brought in was excommunicated, or was threatened with excommunication. They might not have finished yet. It takes a while. And so these Polish Catholics, who in St. Louis are in a position of dominance, or at least in a position of power, if not complete dominance. I don't know who the most dominant group is, but the Polish Catholics were up there, basically got the crap beat out of them by the Catholic Archdiocese, and learned something about what it was like to be an oppressed group. And it was to their great benefit, and they since have become much more gay inclusive than kind of standard Catholic orthodoxy. And I believe their priest is a celibate homosexual, and B, will offer, what's it called? Offer the cracker. I can't think of the name. The cracker and the wine. There's a name for it. That ritual. Will offer that to gay people, practicing gay people, gay families. I think he's willing to perform gay marriages. So Polish Catholics, not necessarily known for their acceptance and tolerance for the gays, learned an important lesson about what it's like for the other beaten down groups when they got themselves beaten down. So there are gays who do not want to assimilate, and there are gays who do want to assimilate. And it's not clear. Well, it's clear, I think, for the continuity of Judaism as it exists for the Maccabees to have won. If the Maccabees had lost, I don't think Judaism would exist today like it existed then. That was one of those important points in Jewish history where the entire enterprise could have been wiped out. Egypt, Persia, Babylon, Maccabees, time and time again. The whole enterprise could have just been wiped out. And I think that was one of those times. And the staggering progress that gay rights is making might be our own undoing, because you're not going to so much have gay-straight alliances anymore when there's alliance in society. And you're not going to need the gays seeking each other out the way we do for comfort and for assistance and for, tutelage and training if we become an assimilated group. I had kind of two maybe distinct points. Okay, so one is about whether gays are better because we're oppressed and because we're powerless. Kind of similar points to be made. And two, whether gay culture stems from our isolation. I would argue we are better because we're oppressed, and we serve a useful role in the subaltern status, that we're freed from the bounds, specifically of sexual normalcy. That once you've come out as gay, you can really go, you're outside of the circle, like the circle of normalcy. So you don't have to worry about trying to fit in and try to be normal. You can be cool with all sorts of fetishes and embrace polygamy or advocate for bestiality, which people do. And it's interesting that a lot of the animal rights people think that we should treat animals like humans, but we'll see where that goes with bestiality, blah, blah, blah. And so, yes, I think it's to our benefit not to assimilate, but it's difficult because every one person says, I want a family, and I want kids, I want to be in the PTA. And so I think that we will begin to lose gay culture, and I think we'll begin to assimilate, and I think that oppression, which has made us easier able to see the oppression of others, will be lost as well. And so eventually we might need some Maccabees to stand up and say it's time to kick ass and the assimilationist gays need to be driven off the reservation. We'll see if it happens. Who knows? Oh, I thought it was over. I always go to 560. 5 minutes, 60 seconds is 6 minutes. No, 600 seconds is 6 minutes. It's 10 minutes. They're not 6 minutes. They're 10 minutes. I always get confused between 600 seconds, 6 minutes, 10 minutes. Anyway, I was done. There's no need to blather on for another 10 seconds. But yes, I'm going to write this up because I think it's an interesting issue at play. And I should type it up. And the phone's ringing, so I'm done. Peace.